What's happening, Bills Mafia? Ryan Thomas here live on the Thomas Take Sports Podcast for a very special edition of the show. It is Monday, October 10th, 2022. Recording this live on Facebook, YouTube as well. I'll be back on the audio side of things, so you can check out this podcast on any and all audio podcasting platforms, whether it's Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, any of them. Any of them that you use, I'm on there. The Thomas Take Sports Podcast is there for your listening consumption. This is a very special edition of the show because this edition of the show was not planned. This edition of the show is in regards to a report. That report from a reporter that I will pull up his name momentarily, but a report that I suggested and reposted in regards to one Christian McCaffrey and the possibility that Christian McCaffrey, the current running back of the Carolina Panthers, could possibly be traded. And I want to use this podcast episode tonight to somewhat hypothesize and or break down the possibility or what the trade would potentially look like if, in fact, the Buffalo Bills did go out and make this addition. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I'm not going to say, with the majority of what other people are going to say, that this is a false report, fake news. No, it's not. This is a real report because this has been reported for the better part of the last year. If you missed it, that's on you. I, on the other hand, did not. I, on the other hand, did hear plenty of times that the Carolina Panthers have been looking to move Christian McCaffrey, as have the New York Giants, in regards to their running back, Saquon Barkley. There's been rumors swirling for quite some time that the Bills could be a potential suitor for not just Christian McCaffrey, but Saquon Barkley as well. And I think that news was accelerated today, or reignited today, with the announcement that the Carolina Panthers have fired their head coach, now former head coach Matt Rule, who, Matt Rule, granted he got fired today. It was probably one of the worst days of his professional coaching career, getting fired from his NFL head coaching gig, but he gets 4 years of dead money paid to him. Gets 4 years of NFL checks to not coach a team. So it's really not a bad deal for Matt Rule. He's going to get paid by the Panthers no matter what, how they decide to pay that. I believe it's going to be over the next 4 years. They'll probably break that down at some point at a later time. But I want to break down this possibility and how this possibility should not be news to really anyone, because Christian McCaffrey is the best player on the Carolina Panthers. Granted, he hasn't really been healthy these last couple seasons, but when Christian McCaffrey is healthy, he's one of the 5 best players league-wide at any position. And the Carolina Panthers are in the midst of a fire sale. The fire sale is starting with the firing of Matt Rule. Steve Wilks, the now interim head coach of the Carolina Panthers, is taking on a situation that is not one to be taken lightly. In the fact that, hey, we're going to take this team, try to make it at least respectable than what it has been these first 4 or 5 weeks of the season. But in the process, we're going to do something that most teams do when they are a bad team. They trade the good players that they do have away to accumulate assets in order to use those assets towards building a brighter future for the roster and for the organization. And it starts with Christian McCaffrey. It has to. It can't end with Christian McCaffrey. You got to trade the easiest guy that you can to trade first, and he's a guy that would obviously be of interest to all 31 other teams in the National Football League, in my opinion, regardless of the health issues. So I want to read, my comments that I received, not just on this podcast, which I want to remind you guys to fire away your comments in the comment section below, wherever you're tuning in, YouTube, the Thomas Take Sports Podcast YouTube channel, or the show's Facebook page. I got to remind you guys to subscribe as well. I really appreciate the support subscribing on YouTube. You're going to get more than just the episodes that you see with me behind the microphone here in my studio, but YouTube Shorts, 60 seconds of me spitting out information, fiery takes that I think you guys will come to enjoy. So Dale Race says, I wouldn't mind if we get Christian McCaffrey cheap. One thing to think of is he wouldn't be carrying this offense like he did in Carolina. He would be splitting time with two other running backs in Devin Singletary and James Cook and or Zach Moss. So you could say three. So I think the less workload could help with his health. If he's healthy, he could be a ginormous threat for this offense. I'm down for checking in at least. Jordan Miller says, after firing Matt Rule, they have to move Christian McCaffrey. And a rumor that swirled around outside of the fact that the Panthers talked to the Buffalo Bills and another team. I want to know who that other team is, by the way. The fact that the Buffalo Bills were one of those two teams is noteworthy, but the rumor is that the Bills have tried to trade for him the last year and a half, and the Panthers' asking price was way too high, and the Bills weren't willing to up the ante. Tyler James Bush makes a great point. He says, I loved CMC since the beginning of his career, but questions remain. Can he stay healthy, and how big of an impact would he have here in Buffalo? I think we're content with Singletary and James Cook. And I'm reading these comments first because I want to address all of them. So I'm going to start off with Dale's comment that you got to kick the tires on this move. I think I'm going to emphasize that statement by saying you have to kick the tires on this move for the simple fact that the Buffalo Bills are one of the three best teams in the NFL, league-wide. They have arguably the best offense right now in the National Football League. They have one of, if not the best defense in the National Football League. The opportunity is now for the Buffalo Bills to really bridge the gap and to really up the ante and to really go all in on this season. And I think a move like this would signal that. And I will say that getting a Christian McCaffrey, you would have to give something up no matter what. Christian McCaffrey is a good player still in this league, and you know what he brings to the table. Granted, he hasn't really been as healthy as we'd like him to be these last few years prior to potentially acquiring him, but he's a player that really changes the game, I think, offensively for any team he plays for any jersey he puts on. I think Josh Allen would benefit from a Christian McCaffrey in the simple sense that for any of the Bills fans out there that don't like to see Josh Allen extend plays with his legs and run up the middle of the field and dive face first, if there's any of those fans out there, which I feel like there's quite a lot, Christian McCaffrey would somewhat take those opportunities away from Josh Allen. Having a Christian McCaffrey for Josh Allen to just drop back to and just flick the ball to and let McCaffrey do the rest would be that safety valve that Josh Allen has frankly never had outside of Stephon Diggs. I mean a safety valve that isn't a wide receiver, a safety valve that's a running back or a tight end. I know Dawson Knox, did some really good things last year, but this season he really hasn't been there as of yet. Breaking down a trade, breaking down what I think would be the possibility of this trade. Who would be featured in this trade? Who would be mixed in for a trade with the Carolina Panthers? And I think that we are wrong to assume any player would be associated with this trade. I don't think there's one player on this team that is easy trade bait for the Buffalo Bills to just part ways with. Every player on this roster, as it stands currently, has a purpose. Every player on this roster currently has shown that they can play when their number is called. Backups, third stringers, with what Buffalo has been through this season to date, offensively and defensively, I don't think there's any player on this team I would trade away right now willingly. And for me to say that's incredible. For me to say that, I never thought I'd be at that point, but here we are. I think this trade has to be one that the Bills spend a little bit of their future capital to acquire Christian McCaffrey. I'm not talking a first-round pick. I'm not talking a second-round pick, but I'm talking multiple mid-round picks with a potential compensation bonus added on that if Christian McCaffrey does X, Y, and Z for the Buffalo Bills, Rather than it being 2/4, it's 2/3. Rather than it being a fourth and a fifth, it's a third and a fourth, or a second and a fourth. Potentially. That's how I see a trade like this going down, because the Buffalo Bills are not in the business of trading their current players away. They want to add more talent to the team. They don't want to add more talent to the team while subtracting talent away from the team and bringing it to somebody else. Carolina's not in the driver's seat here. Carolina is at a point where they need to hit the reset button, and they need to start hitting the reset button now rather than later, because their season's over. Their season's done. They fired their coach. Steve Wilkes isn't going to lead this valiant comeback where the Carolina Panthers are going to make the playoffs. Baker Mayfield looks horrible. Baker Mayfield might be the next Brian Hoyer rather than the next Joe Montana. They're not going anywhere. So for Carolina to know that they're in this situation, to know that they have to trade Christian McCaffrey, this is a guy that you have to get a something for him. You're not going to settle if you're Carolina, but you are going to be talked into a deal, because you're not going to get nothing for this guy. You need him gone, because you're not winning games because of him. You're not losing games because of him. You're essentially wasting a career of a very good player, and he needs to go to a team that gives him the best chance to win. Buffalo is one of those teams. I want to know who that second team is. Something tells me the initials of that team might be KC, maybe not, but at the very least, a trade featuring Christian McCaffrey is one that the Bills have all the right in the world to inquire upon. So I think that this is a fun deal. The comment is too long for me to read, Thomas. It'll take up the screen, but I will read it. Thomas Coburn says, CMC is my favorite back, and having him on my favorite team would be amazing. He could serve a Thurman Thomas type of role for us, which is the type of back he is. He would be worth it if they are trying to get him cheap. Which, name your price. What is cheap for Christian McCaffrey? Pop that on there. Feel free. Just the price of what you feel is worthy of a Christian McCaffrey trade. Pop that on there. I'll read it, and I'll kind of retort. I think my price, just to put it out there, my price would be a you do this for us trade, it's this, rather than what we actually agree upon originally. And, maybe that might sound like a Tim Murray, Buffalo Sabres GM type of deal, but I think with the situation of Christian McCaffrey's lack of durability over the course of the last couple years, you have to make it that way. You have to make it right in the sense that McCaffrey is a guy that hasn't been durable. We're not going to give up a first-round draft choice for him. That's way too much. We're not going to give up a second-round draft choice for him. That's way too much. First-round draft choices in this collective bargaining agreement are very hard to acquire, because if you have a good first-round pick, you have an opportunity to have him for 5 years with an option. If you have a good first-round pick, that seals a lot of checks off a lot of boxes. Of course, you want as many first-round picks as humanly possible. If you can have more than one, obviously that's great. Bills aren't really in that territory to do that, but I think trading away a first would be a big mistake. A second with a kicker, that's a tough one. A second alone for Christian McCaffrey, I think, is too much. I think it's got to be a mid-round pick with the potential to be a little bit more than that. And the interesting thing about Christian McCaffrey, I've had a few people come back at me and say that, Buffalo would have to pay X, Y, and Z for Christian McCaffrey. When I go to a quick commercial break, and by commercial I mean my new sound effect video for the Thomas Take Sports podcast, I'm going to pull up Christian McCaffrey's current contract, and I'll break it down for you in a way that you guys need to understand. And I'm saying it, not that you don't understand it, I'm saying it maybe nobody really knows how these contracts work nowadays. The NFL is wacky and wild and zany in terms of how these contracts are written. So let me break it down for you. Let me explain that Christian McCaffrey is not what you think he is in terms of the cost on the books within the salary cap. This is actually a very doable deal for the Buffalo Bills. I'm going to break it down for you when we come back. I'm going to read some of the comments that are left. Feel free to fire away the comments in the comments section below as I go to a little bit of a little stop set here in the show. Allow me to catch up a little bit to your comments. I really appreciate you guys tuning in and showing your support. This is a topic that I wanted to hammer as soon as I got home today from the day job. This is one that I feel is worthy to discuss. We'll be right back. This is the Thomas Take Sports Podcast. All right, so we're back. There is a site, and it is called Spot Track. It's SPOTARC. And acquiring Christian McCaffrey at the November 1st NFL trade deadline would allow the Buffalo Bills to pay Christian McCaffrey $575,000 for this season. So anyone getting Christian McCaffrey salary cap wise for 2022 is getting a flat out steal. A steal. If he even got hurt, that's a steal. But if you keep him on the team, $12 million in 2023, $12 million in 2024, $12.2 million in 2025, zero guaranteed within those 3 years. So you cut him after that, you get $12 million back on your salary cap. Let's say Buffalo keeps Christian McCaffrey for 2 years. They pay him $575,000 in 2022. They pay him $12 million in 2023, and they wouldn't have to pay him $12 million in 2023 or 2025. But the Carolina Panthers, in trading him away, would eat a dead cap hit of $8.2 million this year and $18.3 million in 2023. So in breaking down a trade, that's the kicker to what could cost the Buffalo Bills more, in fact, than what I predict, is that maybe Carolina says, okay, we're not going to trade Christian McCaffrey because he is at a point where he's expensive for us. He's expensive for us to move on from, so we have to get something in return. Maybe that creates a situation where the Buffalo Bills have to give up a second and a third round draft choice. Are you willing to go that high in a trade for Christian McCaffrey? Are you willing? Let's just say the Buffalo Bills trade a second round pick in next year's draft. The Buffalo Bills trade a third round pick in next year's draft for Christian McCaffrey. And this season, those two picks represent 2023. And this season, the Buffalo Bills go on to win a Super Bowl. Is it worth it? You bet your ass it's worth it. Let's say that happens. No Bills fan is complaining about it. If I told you 3 years ago that the Buffalo Bills would trade, or let's just say I hop in a DeLorean. 2022, I hop in a DeLorean. I go back to 2018. The Buffalo Bills go out and they trade for Stephon Diggs, whatever, 2018-19, whichever year that was. They give up all those draft picks to go out and get him. If I told you 3 years later, no duo in the NFL would have more completions among one another than Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs, you'd tell me it was worth it. You'd tell me it was worth it to give up all those picks for Stephon Diggs. For a franchise that has never won a Super Bowl, for a franchise that knocked on the door with one of the greatest teams ever assembled and didn't pull it off, the opportunity is now. The time is now. There is no other favorite in the AFC right now, and I'm including Kansas City, that has blown everybody away the way that the Buffalo Bills have, I should say, through their 4 wins. They had one loss. It was to the Dolphins. It was in heat that would rival the Sahara Desert, and it is what it is. 4-1. We got that monkey that lost off our back, so whatever. But this is a move that I would consider. And you betcha, You betcha you know where I'm going with this. If it's enough of a move to go out and trade for Christian McCaffrey, it sure as hell is enough of a move to kick the tires. Come November, this team could potentially have Christian McCaffrey and Odell Beckham Jr. If I were to tell you that 3-4 years ago, your head would spin around like Linda Blair in The Exorcist. It wouldn't make your mind would be blown if I were to tell you that that was a potential opportunity. I'm not saying it's going to happen, and I'm not saying necessarily that it should happen, but the possibility is realistic, and the possibility is one that I feel needs to be heavily considered. Heavily considered. And if mortgaging your future is the price you pay for winning one Super Bowl, it is worth it. I want to get to some more comments because I think I'm on fire on this one. So let's get to some more comments here because I want to hear from the people. Where will the money come from? We have some folks who need to get paid, including Gabe Davis. Well, the money, I broke that down for you, Samuel C. White. The money is of no issue to Big Baller Bean. I think the money is something we've seen. We've also seen a willingness from some of these guys on the team to restructure their deal. I'm not saying that they'll need to do that, but it's a possibility. Bobby Nelson says, I have to say, as hard as I am on the running backs, the holes aren't there to begin with. I don't know about that. I would say that the running game hasn't even been established at any point by Ken Dorsey this season, and I thought in the preseason it would be. I thought in the preseason Ken Dorsey did a hell of a job using the running backs, but look at the stats. Just look at attempts. Just look at rushing attempts between Devin Singletary, Zach Moss, and James Cook. This is the only week this season that Devin Singletary had more rush attempts than Josh Allen. That's not right. That's not how it's supposed to go down. Not to me, at least. Samuel C. White says Zach Moss could be moved, though that would not open up money, really. No, it would not. Dean Thomas says, why not we toss a second one in on Cook, who's looking like a bust? My dad says a lot of crazy things. I'm not willing to go quite there yet. I'm willing to say that if I want to play armchair general manager, which I have said to my dad in conversation before, that if I'm on a, draft, or I should say, if I'm in a draft room in April, second round rolls around, the Bills are picking, I'm taking a safety at that pick. I'm taking somebody that I can invest my future in, that knowing that Jordan Poyer is on the wrong end of 30, knowing that Micah Hyde's on the wrong end of 30, and I'm not just saying this because of the injuries. I literally said this. Like, I said this in previous episodes of the show where I'm talking about what the Bills should do in mock drafts and literally naming players based on what they did in college, based on how they can play, how their skills can translate to the National Football League. And I'm saying go out and draft this safety, go out and get this corner, Kyer Elam, who they actually drafted, and you're really opening things up on defense for your future. And they didn't do that. They went out and they got James Cook. And I think James Cook can be a legit running back, not as a rookie, though. And there's one reason for that. I think James Cook needs to get bigger. I think he needs to add, 10 to 15 more pounds of muscle. I need some meat. I mean, I'm watching him and I'm saying to myself, he gets hit out of bounds one time by a dirty NFL defender. I'm talking to you, Miami. I'm talking to you, Pittsburgh. Then he might not be around, much longer in the NFL. So that's how I see that. I think the run game hasn't even been established yet. I do want to shift gears a little bit to the Carolina Panthers. One of my best friends, longtime buddy of mine, Zach Trutwine, is a huge Carolina Panthers fan. He's excited that Matt Rule was fired. I don't even think you have to be a Carolina Panthers fan to be excited that Matt Rule was fired today. He's just a terrible, terrible head coach. I never really understood the hire. Had some success at Baylor, but come on. Can we finally move forward from believing that a college head coach can get it done in the NFL? More oftentimes than not, they fail. So let's move on to Carolina, actually. And I want to talk about the Panthers' next head coach and who I think could be the next Panthers head coach. Now, if Carolina was smart, which as of now I don't know if they are, maybe they're getting smarter, but that doesn't mean that they're smart. They're getting smarter right now by firing Matt Rule, by these reports that they're willing to entertain trade talks, trade discussions for Christian McCaffrey. I'm saying to myself, David Tepper, the owner of the Carolina Panthers, he has to bring in a head coach with some credibility. He has to bring in a coach with a pedigree in the National Football League. If you're looking at NFL head coaches as like free agents, which one is the big fish? Which one is the guy that you can hire and he can provide you some relevancy? Who's a guy that wants to dip his toes back in the NFL waters? And it appears as if, from everything I've read, from everything I've heard, that Sean Payton wants to come back to the National Football League. If you are to reel in the big fish that is Sean Payton, who had a ton of success in New Orleans, obviously, who had a ton of success actually as an OC in Dallas under Bill Parcells with Tony Romo, I would say that you have to really sell it. You really have to sell what the vision is of the Carolina Panthers. And right now, if you're trying to sell the vision, what the hell is there to sell? Can you sell the potential of Baker Mayfield? Apparently, that only lasts so long for Cleveland. It only lasted so long for Carolina in the sense that he has not looked good these first 4 or 5 weeks. But to play devil's advocate on my statement there, and to give you, a little bit of an argument point, even against my own argument, the only way to salvage Baker Mayfield, the only way is to do it with a redeemable coach. And quite possibly, is Sean Payton the guy that could reinvigorate Baker Mayfield's career? It's hard to argue against that. The question is Baker Mayfield good enough to be reinvigorated and rejuvenated? Mentally, is he there with all the stuff that has gone against him? Deshaun Watson over him, Cleveland dragging him through the mud, being shipped out to Carolina for next to nothing. That had to hurt his confidence. And it had to hurt his confidence even more when he realized that Ben McAdoo, who was a failed head coach in his own right of the Giants a couple years back, he practically ruined Eli Manning's tail end of his career. He was called upon to be the offensive coordinator for the Panthers. It's very tough for me to see how this was ever going to work when Baker Mayfield was brought into a situation like this. Who is out there outside of DJ Moore at receiver for Baker Mayfield to look at and say, wow, that's the guy that I got to throw to? There's not much there. There's not much there. And if Christian McCaffrey is gone, it's even harder to sell the possibility of becoming the next head coach of the Carolina Panthers. But the one thing that the Carolina Panthers can offer a guy like Sean Payton is the opportunity to run the full gambit of the organization. You have a new owner in David Tepper who has little to no experience owning a team and running the day-to-day football operation. He's not really necessarily a football guy. He just wanted to be one of 32 that own an NFL team. It's an elusive club, a very highly elusive club in the sense that so many businessmen try to tap into this league and try to become an owner, and they can't do it. They go to bid it, they bid war, against one another. And we're talking about the Buffalo Bills now, circling the wagons. Terry Pegula had to spend $500 million more in order to buy the Bills in a bidding war with people we won't mention, music that we won't listen to. So I think that if you're the Panthers, you got to try to go get Sean Payton. And if you're going to go get him, you have to say to yourselves, what way can we sell this? Hey, full control of the roster, full control over day-to-day operation. You bring in your coaches, you bring in your players, you run the team your way. And I think so many teams will be very envious of the position that the Panthers could potentially be in if they do bring in Sean Payton, because of the fact that there were a lot of teams last year looking for a head coach. And let's just take Denver, for example. Denver made a big mistake hiring Nathaniel Hackett. I gave that hiring a D when the hire grading show came out. Nathaniel Hackett ain't it. He can't hack it. Sean Payton has proven that he can, and I think a lot of these teams will wish that they waited a year to hire a head coach, because it is reported that Sean Payton wants to get back in. Tom Brady's retirement definitely coming sooner rather than later. And you look at that NFC South without Tom Brady, it's wide open. You have without Tom Brady, they're not the Bucs that they are today. The Saints, without Sean Payton, they're not the Saints. Without Drew Brees, they're not the Saints anymore. The Atlanta Falcons are in complete rebuild mode. So if I'm Carolina, that's a move that I think you have to consider, and you have to go after it. You have to be diligent in going after it, and you have to create a selling point to woo Sean Payton to your organization. So there you have it. The question is, do they go with the Baker Mayfield? Do they try to revive the careers of Mayfield and or Darnold again with Sean Payton if they were to bring him in? Or does Sean Payton say, look, I'm not going this route. We're moving on from these guys. And do you cross your fingers and hope that the Baltimore Ravens have a difficult time trying to extend one Lamar Jackson, try to make a play for him? That would be exciting. That would be very exciting. And I think that's something that, while a stretch, it's fun to speculate, because at the end of the day, that's what we like to do in terms of looking at the genie in the bottle, type of stuff, looking at the future. More comments coming in. Thomas Coburn says, Matt Rule isn't a terrible head coach. He was great in college, just not an NFL head coach. I don't think Baylor's success is enough to get that hire. I mean, Carolina did, but I don't. I didn't see it. I didn't see what he was able to do at Baylor successfully translating to the NFL, and it didn't. Going on to the next comment. Any chance for a Cam Newton reunion? I would certainly hope not, for the sake of Carolina Panthers fans. But listen, guys, I really feel that you want to bridge the gap. If you're the Buffalo Bills, you got to be willing to have these conversations. You feel like you can make your team a little bit better just by adding in a guy like Christian McCaffrey, or let's just say they don't even go after McCaffrey. The discussion is going to continue that they should make a trade. They should sign Odell Beckham Jr. And as long as they have a quarterback like Josh Allen, who is spreading the ball around better than anybody, who is playing better than anybody right now at the quarterback position, in my opinion, I think Odell Beckham Jr.'s favorite quarterback in his career. You toss Eli aside, you toss Baker aside, you toss Matt Stafford aside, Josh Allen and OBJ would be a match made in heaven, in my opinion. In the slot, few guys really use that slot receiver in the way that Josh Allen does. Tom Brady obviously would be one of them. Matt Stafford would be another one of them. But I feel like Josh Allen and OBJ playing that slot role. You got Diggs, Davis, OBJ. McKenzie could then be regulated to wide receiver 3/4/ return duty, because Jamison Crowder is out too. That was an addition that, we were really banking on, and it looks like he's going to be out for the season. I think the one guy that it would stunt his development would be Khalil Shakir. And I liked what I saw from him. 5 catches, 75 yards, a touchdown. Could have had more yards if it wasn't for a drop, but The kid's young. He's got a lot of potential. But what would a guy like OBJ do for his development in terms of actually, maybe not on the field, taking reps away on the field, but off the field? That is just a wealth of route running expertise. OBJ, Stephon Diggs, and I think the guy that very, very well could be one of the best route runners in the NFL that isn't Stephon Diggs is Gabriel Davis. Man, this guy is getting better and better each and every year, and I love to see it. So there it is. That's the Thomas Take Sports Podcast, 7:59, October 10th, 2022. Wrapping up the show. My thoughts on the potential of a Christian McCaffrey trade, what it could possibly look like. I think a compensation type trade is what I would expect. I don't see Brandon Beane willing to trade any player away with how the team is playing, with how the team looks. If Carolina asks for it, that's a different story. Would a Trey White, Christian McCaffrey deal make sense? That's a really hot topic. That's one that I feel like I'll get a comment on that soon. So I wanted to hit the nail on the head there, or try to, and just saying I wouldn't want to do that. I wouldn't want to trade anyone on this team right now. I'd rather it be a compensation type trade where picks are involved, because realistically, what mid-round pick is going to make this roster? There's not many out there. There's not many open spots on this team currently. So there you have it. I hope you really enjoyed the show. I had a lot of great interaction. I really appreciate you guys hopping on. And I think that as we inch closer to November 1st, we're going to hear more and more about the potential of Buffalo adding players like Christian McCaffrey, Odell Beckham Jr., who is expected to be fully healthy come November. Man, there's a lot of fun things to look forward to. And depending on what the Bills' record is at that time, what if they win every game from now until that point? What player wouldn't want to come here? Whoever thought we'd be saying that, right? Thanks for tuning in. I appreciate the support. Go Bills.